I thought I was just coming home to rest, but someone had already started renovating my bedroom without asking me. She said it was a family decision. I said she was trespassing. Then came the lies, the forgeries, and the police. They tried to gaslight me out of my own house. Too bad I had photos, timestamps, legal backup, and one final move they never saw coming. My name is Autumn Davis, and at 29, I thought I'd finally made it. Not in the grand, millionaire by 30 way that Instagram tells you success looks like, but in the quiet, steady way that actually matters. 7 years of double shifts, skipped vacations, and dinners of ramen noodles had led to this moment, standing in front of my own house, keys heavy in my hand like a medal I'd earned. The house wasn't much to look at. A 2-bedroom ranch on the outskirts of Milwaukee, with siding that needed power washing and a front yard that the previous owners had clearly given up on somewhere around 2015. But when I looked at it, I didn't see the peeling paint or the overgrown hedges. I saw freedom. I saw the place where I could finally breathe without asking permission, where I could paint the walls any color I wanted, where I could build something that was entirely mine. Working logistics for a regional supermarket chain isn't glamorous. Most days, I'm buried in spreadsheets, tracking shipments, arguing with vendors about delivery windows, and trying to solve the eternal puzzle of how to get fresh produce from point A to point B without it turning into expensive compost. But it's steady work, and after years of watching every penny, that steadiness had transformed into this, a deed with my name on it. The irony wasn't lost on me. My parents had never owned a home. They'd moved us from rental to rental throughout my childhood, always chasing cheaper rent or a better school district, always one paycheck away from another upheaval. When they died in a car accident during my junior year of college, black ice on I-94, the kind of senseless tragedy that makes you stop believing in fair, I'd promised myself I'd build the stability they never could. That first night in my house, I sat on the floor of the empty living room with a pizza and a beer, watching the sunset paint shadows across the walls. The silence was perfect. Not the heavy silence of grief or the tense silence of waiting for bad news, but the gentle silence of being exactly where you're supposed to be. I'd done it. Despite everything, I'd actually done it. The next few months were a blur of small victories. I painted the bedroom a soft sage green, the exact shade of calm I'd been craving. I haunted estate sales and Facebook Marketplace, slowly filling the rooms with furniture that had character and stories, even if they weren't my stories yet. I learned how to fix a running toilet from YouTube, planted tomatoes in the backyard, and even adopted a cat from the shelter, a grumpy tabby named Milo, who seemed to approve of the house as much as I did. Work colleagues started noticing the change in me. Nina, who managed inventory and had become my closest friend at the company, said I walked different now. Like you're not apologizing for taking up space anymore. She told me over lunch one day. She was right. For the first time in my adult life, I had roots. I had a place that couldn't be taken away by a landlord's whim or a rent increase. Or so I thought. The Tuesday that everything changed started like any other. I'd been dealing with a nightmare shipment, 3 pallets of dairy that had somehow ended up in Des Moines instead of our Milwaukee distribution center, and my head was pounding from the hours of phone calls it had taken to sort out. My manager had finally told me to go home early, probably because I looked as frustrated as I felt. I remember thinking how nice it would be to have the house to myself in the middle of the afternoon. Maybe I'd take a bath, or finally start that book that had been sitting on my nightstand for weeks. I pulled into my driveway at 2:47 p.m. I remember the exact time because I'd glanced at my phone to make sure I wasn't imagining getting out of work early. That's when I noticed the unfamiliar truck parked at the curb, a white contractor's van with ladder racks and no company logo. My first thought was that it belonged to someone working on the Hendersons' house next door. They'd been renovating their kitchen for what felt like forever. But when I walked up to my front door, I could hear voices inside, male voices, and music, the tinny sound of a radio playing classic rock. My hand froze on the doorknob. Someone was in my house. I pushed the door open slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs. The smell hit me first. paint fumes, sharp and chemical. Then I saw them, two men in splattered work clothes, rollers in hand, covering my sage green walls with primer white. My bedroom walls. The sanctuary I'd created was being erased stroke by stroke. "What the hell are you doing?" The words came out sharper than I'd intended, powered by shock and fury. The younger of the two workers, barely out of his teens, jumped and nearly dropped his roller. "Oh, are you the homeowner?" "Yes, I'm the homeowner. And you're in my house, painting my walls, without my permission." Each word felt like a stone I was spitting out. The older worker, a man with graying stubble and tired eyes, set down his roller carefully. "Ma'am, we have a work order. The lady who hired us said she was family. Said she had permission to update the place." What lady? But even as I asked, a sick feeling was already spreading through my stomach. "Ivy Mitchell," he said, pulling out a crumpled invoice from his pocket. "Said she was your cousin, helping you out with some updates while you were at work. Wanted it to be a surprise." Ivy. Of course it was Ivy. The workers were still explaining when I heard her voice from the hallway. That sugary sweet tone that always made my teeth ache. "Oh, Autumn, you're home early." Ivy appeared in the doorway of my bedroom like she owned the place, wearing designer jeans and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Ivy, what the hell is this?" I gestured at the half-primed walls, at the drop cloths covering my carefully chosen furniture, at the invasion of my space. She waved a manicured hand dismissively. "Surprise, I know how busy you've been with work. So Travis and I thought we'd help spruce the place up. This green is so depressing. Don't you think we're going with a nice neutral beige? Much more appealing." Appealing for what I like the green. I chose the green. This is my house. Her laugh tinkled like broken glass. "Oh, Autumn, don't be so dramatic. We're family. This is what family does. We help each other. Besides, Travis and I are going to need somewhere to stay for a while, and we thought it would be nice if the spare room matched ours." The words hit me like ice water. "Excuse me." "Well, we can't all afford to have extra bedrooms sitting empty," she said, her tone shifting to something harder. "Some of us have children to think about. But don't worry. We'll contribute to groceries and utilities. It's really a win-win when you think about it." I felt like I was having an out-of-body experience, watching this conversation happen to someone else. "Ivy, you can't just move into my house. You can't just repaint my bedroom without asking. That's not how any of this works." The workers had started quietly packing up their supplies, clearly uncomfortable with the family drama unfolding. The older one muttered something about needing to make another appointment, and they slipped out, leaving Ivy and me alone in my violated bedroom. "I don't understand why you're being so selfish," Ivy said, crossing her arms. "After everything I've done for you, what you've done for me." The laugh that came out of me was harsh and bitter. "You mean letting me crash on your couch for 2 weeks 3 years ago when I was between apartments. The 2 weeks you remind me about every time we see each other." Her face flushed. "I took you in when you had nowhere else to go. I fed you, gave you a roof over your head. For 2 weeks, Ivy, 2 weeks, 3 years ago, I paid you rent, I bought my own food, I cleaned your house while you and Travis went to work, and I've thanked you about 100 times since then." She rolled her eyes. "This is exactly your problem, Autumn. You've always been so ungrateful, so focused on keeping score. That's not what family does. Family doesn't break into each other's houses and redecorate without permission either." I didn't break in. I used the spare key. My blood ran cold. "What spare key?" "The one you gave me, obviously. Remember when I helped you move in?" She said it so casually, like it was a given that she'd have access to my home. I thought back to move-in day. She'd shown up uninvited with Travis and their 2 kids, ostensibly to help, but mostly to critique my choices. At one point, she'd asked to borrow my keys to get something from her car. I'd been distracted, trying to direct the friends who were actually helping me move furniture, and I'd handed them over without thinking. "You made a copy of my key." My voice was dangerously quiet. "Well, Someone needs to have one for emergencies, she said with a shrug. What if something happened to you? What if there was a fire? You live alone. Autumn. It's not safe. Get out. What? Get out of my house, now, and leave the key. Her mouth dropped open in mock shock. Are you seriously kicking out your own cousin, your family, the person who helped you when you had nothing? You helped me for 2 weeks 3 years ago, and you've been holding it over my head ever since. That doesn't give you the right to invade my home, Ivy. It doesn't give you the right to change things without my permission, and it sure as hell doesn't give you the right to move in uninvited. Travis said you'd react like this, she sniffed. He said you'd let that house go to your head, make you think you're better than us, but you're not. Autumn, you're still just that pathetic girl who showed up at my door with a suitcase and nowhere else to go. The words stung, but not as much as she probably hoped, because I wasn't that girl anymore. That girl had been grieving and lost, fresh from losing her job in a round of layoffs, trying to figure out how to survive in a world that suddenly felt too big and too empty. But that girl had also been determined. She'd taken those 2 weeks on Ivy's couch and used them to regroup, to find a new job, to start rebuilding. You're right, I said calmly. I did show up at your door with nothing, and you helped me, and I'm grateful for that. But that doesn't mean you own me, Ivy. It doesn't mean you get to treat my life like it's yours to rearrange. She grabbed her purse from where she'd set it on my dresser. My dresser, in my room, in my house, and stormed toward the door. Fine, when you're sitting here all alone in your precious house, don't come crying to me. Family is supposed to stick together, but you clearly don't understand that. Leave the key, I repeated. She made a big show of digging through her purse and pulling out a key on a rhinestone keychain. Of course, she'd bedazzled my house key, and slamming it on the kitchen counter as she passed. There, happy I hope this house is worth losing your family over. The front door slammed behind her, leaving me alone in my half-painted bedroom. I sank down onto the plastic-covered bed, my legs suddenly too shaky to hold me up. The smell of primer was giving me a headache, and I could see the ghost of my sage-green walls bleeding through the white in places. But Ivy was wrong. I hadn't lost my family. My real family had been gone for 8 years. What I'd lost was an illusion. The pretense that Ivy's conditional kindness was the same as love, and standing there in my vandalized sanctuary, I realized that was a loss I could live with. The next few weeks were supposed to be peaceful. I'd hired different painters to restore my sage-green walls, changed the locks, and tried to put the whole incident behind me. But Ivy had other plans. It started small. She began showing up unannounced, always with an excuse. First, it was to apologize properly. She stood on my doorstep with store-bought cookies and that same fake smile, talking about how family should forgive each other when I politely declined to let her in. She left the cookies on the porch and said she'd wait for me to come to my senses. Then came the food deliveries. Casseroles would appear on my doorstep with notes about how she was worried I wasn't eating properly. Once, I came home to find she'd left groceries in a cooler by my door, including the exact brands I used, which meant she'd been watching my shopping habits. The gestures might have seemed caring to an outsider, but I recognized them for what they were: attempts to establish a presence in my life, to create obligations. The weekend visits were worse. She'd park outside my house with Travis and their kids, not approaching but just sitting there, sometimes for an hour or more. When neighbors asked, she'd tell them she was checking on her cousin who lived alone. Mrs. Henderson from next door even mentioned how sweet it was that I had family who cared so much. 3 weeks after the painting incident, things escalated. I came home from a particularly long shift to find my spice rack reorganized. Not just tidied, completely rearranged according to some system that made sense only to Ivy. My stomach dropped as I realized what this meant. She'd been inside my house again. I checked all the windows, the back door, even the garage. Everything was locked, just as I'd left it. But somehow, she'd gotten in. The next morning, I found my bank statements had been moved. They were still in the drawer where I kept them, but they'd been reordered, and one was missing. The one showing my mortgage payment and account balances. Nothing else was taken, but the violation made my skin crawl. You need cameras, Nina told me over lunch when I explained what was happening. This is beyond pushy family stuff. This is stalking. She's not stalking me, I protested weakly. She's just… Ivy. Nina's expression was deadly serious. Listen to what you just told me. She made a copy of your key without permission. She hired people to change your house while you were gone. She's showing up uninvited. She's been inside your house after you changed the locks. Autumn, this isn't normal. The pattern continued. Small things would be different each time I came home. A book moved from the coffee table to the shelf. My mail sorted differently. Once, I found a family photo of Ivy, Travis, and their kids tucked into my refrigerator magnets, a photo I'd never seen before. Certainly never put there myself. Travis started calling, always when he knew I'd be at work, leaving voicemails about family responsibility and how disappointed he was in my selfishness. His messages grew increasingly manipulative. Ivy's just trying to help you. Autumn, she worries about you all alone in that house. What if something happened? What if you fell and couldn't call for help? At least when we were planning to stay with you, someone would be there. The subtext was clear: let us move in, or we'll make your life miserable. One evening, I was making dinner when I heard a key in the lock. My blood froze. I'd changed the locks. There was no way Ivy could have a key, but someone was definitely trying to get in. I grabbed my phone, ready to call 911 when the attempt stopped. I peered through the peephole to see Ivy walking away, shoving something into her purse. That's when I realized she must have had multiple copies made. Of course she had. Why stop at one? The next day, I had a locksmith install deadbolts that couldn't be picked, along with a chain lock for when I was home. But the damage to my peace of mind was already done. I found myself checking windows obsessively, taking photos of every room before I left for work, documenting everything. This is exactly what she wants, Nina observed when I showed her my phone full of timestamp photos. She's got you living in fear in your own home. You need legal help. She was right, but I kept hoping Ivy would just give up. I was naive enough to think that if I ignored her long enough, she'd move on to easier targets. The breaking point came on a Thursday. I'd worked late covering for a sick colleague and was exhausted when I got home after 9 p.m. Something felt off the moment I walked in. Nothing looked different at first glance, but there was a smell. Ivy's perfume, that cloying floral scent she'd worn for years. In the kitchen, I found evidence of her visit. She'd cooked dinner. There were dishes in the sink, food in containers in my fridge, and a note on the counter. Made your favorite, beef stew. There's enough for the week. Take care of yourself. It wasn't my favorite. I'd been vegetarian for 2 years. But it was the principle that made me shake with rage. She'd spent hours in my house, cooking in my kitchen, using my dishes, all while I was at work. The beef stew felt like a deliberate insult. She knew about my dietary choices, but was asserting that she knew better. I called in sick the next day and spent it installing security cameras. Every entrance, every window, every angle of approach to my house was now under surveillance. The system sent alerts to my phone whenever it detected motion. It felt like overkill, but I needed to know how she was getting in. That evening, I got my answer. At 6:47 p.m., while I was in the shower, my phone buzzed with an alert. I wrapped myself in a towel and checked the feed. There was Ivy, bold as brass, walking up to my back door. She looked around carefully, then reached up to the exterior light fixture and pulled something out. A hide-a-key box I'd never put there. I watched in real time as my cousin let herself into my house using a key she'd hidden on my own property. The audacity of it took my breath away. How long had that been there? How many times had she let herself in while I was oblivious? Still dripping wet, I threw on clothes and stormed downstairs. Ivy was in my living room, fluffing pillows on my couch like she lived there. "Get out," I said flatly. She jumped, then tried to recover with a smile. "Oh, Autumn, I didn't hear you come down. I saw you on camera. Ivy, I saw you get the key from the hide-a-box. The hide-a-box I didn't put there. Get out." Her face went through several expressions: surprise, calculation, then finally, defiance. I'm trying to help you. Autumn, this isolation isn't healthy. You need family around. I need you to leave me alone. I need you to stop breaking into my house. I need you to accept that this is my home, not yours. You're being ridiculous, she snapped. Do you know how lucky you are Travis and I can barely make rent on our place, and you have 2 bedrooms all to yourself? Do you know how selfish that is? There it was, the real issue. It had never been about my safety or family togetherness. It was about them wanting what I had. Your financial problems are not my responsibility, I said coldly. Now get out before I call the police. She left, but not before making sure I knew this wasn't over. You'll regret this, Autumn. When you realize how alone you really are, you'll beg us to come back, but we might not be so forgiving next time. As I watched her car disappear down the street, I realized Nina had been right all along. This wasn't going to stop on its own. Ivy had made it clear that she felt entitled to my space, my life, my home, and if I didn't take serious action, she'd keep escalating until she found a way to take what she wanted. The morning after I confronted Ivy about the hide-a-key, I woke up determined to take control of the situation. I spent my Saturday doing a thorough security sweep of my property, looking for any other hidden keys or vulnerabilities. I found 2 more hide-a-boxes, one under a fake rock by the garden, another magnetically attached to the underside of my metal porch chair. The level of premeditation made my stomach turn. I documented everything with photos and videos, then drove to the hardware store. The elderly man behind the counter raised his eyebrows when I bought new locks for every door, window locks, a security bar for the sliding glass door, and motion sensor lights for every corner of the property. Everything okay, miss? He asked gently. Just taking precautions, I replied, trying to smile. He nodded knowingly and threw in a personal alarm for free. Just in case, he said. That afternoon, while installing the new locks, I noticed Mrs. Henderson watching from her garden. She wandered over with the pretense of offering lemonade. That cousin of yours was by earlier, she mentioned casually. Said she was worried about you, asked if I'd seen you today. My hands tightened on the screwdriver. What did you tell her? That it wasn't my business to keep track of neighbors' comings and goings. Mrs. Henderson said firmly. She didn't like that answer much. I looked at the older woman with new appreciation. Thank you. My sister was like that, she continued, surprising me. Always thought she knew best, always pushing boundaries, had to get a restraining order eventually. Family can be the worst sometimes because they think blood gives them rights it doesn't. Over the next week, I established new routines. I varied my work schedule when possible, took different routes home, and checked my security footage religiously every morning. I documented the state of my house every evening. I did a walkthrough to ensure nothing had been disturbed. Nina noticed the toll it was taking. You're losing weight, she observed during a break. When's the last time you slept properly? I'm fine, I insisted, but we both knew it was a lie. I was living like a prisoner in my own home, constantly vigilant, always waiting for the next invasion. That's when Nina reached into her purse and pulled out a business card and a small bronze keychain with boundaries engraved on it. The lawyer is a friend of my brother, she explained. Marcus Campbell. He specializes in family property disputes and harassment cases. And this, she pressed the keychain into my hand, is to remind you that having boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary. I fingered the keychain, the word boundaries catching the light. Such a simple word, but one I'd struggled with my whole life. Growing up in chaos, you learn to be flexible, accommodating, grateful for any stability offered, but sometimes that gratitude gets weaponized against you. Thank you, I whispered, pocketing both items. The very next day, my bank called about suspicious activity. Someone had tried to add themselves as an authorized user on my account. The attempt had failed because they didn't have my social security number quite right. They'd transposed 2 digits, but the name they'd tried to add Ivy Mitchell. I drove straight to the bank, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The manager, A kind woman named Patricia took me into her office and pulled up the records. The request was made online, she explained. They had most of your information correct. Your full name, date of birth, address, even your mother's maiden name. How is that possible? Patricia's expression was sympathetic. Usually, it's someone close to the victim, someone with access to personal documents. I thought about all the times Ivy had been in my house unsupervised, all the papers she could have photographed or copied. My filing system wasn't exactly Fort Knox. I kept important documents in a desk drawer, thinking the locked house was security enough. What else might they have tried? I asked, dreading the answer. Patricia's fingers flew over the keyboard. Let me check. Oh, there were inquiries at 2 other banks about accounts in your name. No success. But the attempts were made. Can you trace where the requests came from? I can give you the IP addresses for the police, she said. You are filing a report, aren't you? I nodded, though the thought of involving police in a family matter made me feel sick. But this wasn't just pushiness anymore. This was attempted financial fraud. I spent the rest of the day at the bank, then the police station, then on the phone with credit monitoring services. By evening, I was exhausted, but had protection in place fraud alerts on all my accounts, credit freezes with all 3 bureaus, and a police report number that made everything feel terrifyingly official. Marcus Campbell called me that evening. Nina had given him a heads up about my situation. Identity theft by family members is more common than you'd think, he said, his voice calm and professional. The good news is, you caught it early. The bad news is this escalation suggests your cousin isn't going to stop on her own. What do you recommend? Document everything. Save all messages. Keep all recordings. Photograph any evidence. We'll need to establish a pattern of harassment for a restraining order. And Autumn install a safe for your important documents. Tonight, if possible. After we hung up, I sat in my living room, looking around at the space I'd worked so hard to create. The sage walls were back. The furniture was arranged just how I liked it. Milo was purring in his favorite spot by the window. It should have felt like home, but Ivy had poisoned it with her intrusions. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every noise made me jump. Was that a key in the lock? A footstep on the porch. I found myself checking the security cameras obsessively, watching the empty feeds like they were horror movies where the monster could appear at any moment. At 3 a.m., my phone buzzed with a motion alert. Heart pounding. I pulled up the feed. There was someone at my back door, dressed in dark clothing, their face hidden by a hood. They were trying the handle, then moved to the window, testing it. I grabbed my phone and the personal alarm, ready to call 911, when the figure turned slightly and I caught a glimpse of their profile in the motion light. Travis. My cousin's husband was trying to break into my house at 3 a.m. I hit record on the app and called the police, my voice surprisingly steady as I reported an attempted break-in in progress. I gave them the address and mentioned I had video evidence of the intruder. Travis must have heard the sirens approaching because he suddenly bolted, running through my backyard and disappearing over the fence. By the time the police arrived, he was gone, but I had everything recorded, his face clearly visible in several frames, his attempts to force the window, his flight when he heard the sirens. Do you know this person? The officer asked after viewing the footage. That's my cousin's husband, Travis Mitchell, I said. There's an ongoing situation. I filed a report earlier today about attempted identity theft. The officers exchanged glances. One of them, Officer Bradley, took out his notebook. We'll need you to come to the station tomorrow to file additional charges. This is attempted breaking and entering, possibly burglary. With the identity theft, you're looking at a pattern of criminal behavior. After they left, I sat on my couch, clutching the boundaries keychain Nina had given me. The words seemed to pulse in my hand, a reminder that I wasn't the one who'd crossed lines here. I wasn't the one skulking around in the dark, trying to break into someone's home. I thought about calling Ivy, confronting her about Travis's attempted break-in, but Marcus Campbell's words echoed in my head. Document everything. Don't engage. Let them dig their own hole. So instead, I made myself tea and waited for dawn, knowing that tomorrow I'd have to take the next step in protecting what was mine. The house that had once been my sanctuary had become a battleground, but I wasn't going to let them win. I'd worked too hard and come too far to let anyone, family or not, take away what I'd built. The next morning, I sat across from Marcus Campbell in his downtown office, the Boundaries keychain turning over and over in my fingers. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 40s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and an air of quiet competence that made me feel safer than I had in weeks. "Nina filled me in on the basics," he said, pulling out a legal pad. "But I need to hear everything from you. Start from the beginning." For the next hour, I laid out the whole story: the unauthorized renovation, the break-ins, the hidden keys, the attempted identity theft, and finally Travis's 3 a.m. visit. Marcus took notes steadily, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I showed him the security footage, his expression grew increasingly grim. "This is textbook escalation," he said finally. "They started with boundary violations, moved to criminal trespass, attempted financial fraud, and now attempted burglary. The fact that their family doesn't minimize this, if anything, it makes it worse because they're exploiting your relationship and personal information. So what do I do? First, we file for an emergency restraining order. With this evidence, we should get it immediately. Second, we pursue criminal charges. The attempted identity theft alone is a felony. Add the breaking and entering, and we're looking at serious consequences." "They have kids," I said weakly, thinking of Ivy's 2 children. Marcus's expression softened slightly. "I understand your concern, but Autumn, they made these choices knowing they had children to consider. You're not responsible for the consequences of their criminal behavior. You're simply protecting yourself." He was right, of course, but knowing that didn't make it easier. As he prepared the paperwork, I thought about how we'd gotten here. How had Ivy's entitlement grown so monstrous that she thought breaking into my home was justified? When had Travis decided that attempted burglary was a reasonable response to being told no? "There's something else," Marcus said carefully. "In cases like this, perpetrators often escalate one more time when legal action begins. They feel cornered and lash out. Do you have somewhere else you can stay for a few days?" I thought about it. Nina had already offered her spare room, but I rebelled against the idea of being driven from my own home. Still, Marcus's concern was evident. "I'll think about it," I promised. We spent another hour going through documentation, signing forms, and discussing next steps. Marcus would file the restraining order petition that afternoon and coordinate with the prosecutor's office about criminal charges. He gave me his cell number with instructions to call immediately if anything else happened. I left his office feeling strange, relieved to have professional help, but also sad that it had come to this. The Boundaries keychain clinked against my car keys as I drove to work, a metallic reminder of lines drawn and crossed. Nina was waiting by my desk with coffee and a concerned expression. "How did it go?" "He's filing for a restraining order today," I said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "And they're pursuing criminal charges for the identity theft and attempted break-in." "Good," she said firmly. "You need protection, legal and otherwise. Which reminds me, my spare room offer stands. Actually, I insist, just for a few nights while the legal stuff gets sorted." Before I could protest, our manager appeared. "Autumn, there's someone here to see you. Says she's your cousin." My blood ran cold. "Is she in the building?" "Reception has her in the lobby. Should I have security?" "Yes," Nina interrupted. "Call security now." But it was too late. Ivy's voice carried down the hallway, shrill and demanding. "I know she's here. This is a family emergency. You can't keep me from my own cousin." I stood frozen as she appeared around the corner. Her face flushed with rage. She looked wild, hair disheveled, makeup smeared, clothes wrinkled like she'd slept in them, or hadn't slept at all. "You called the police on Travis?" she screamed, advancing toward me. "Your own family. He could go to jail. Is that what you want?" Security arrived then, 2 guards flanking her. but she kept shouting over their attempts to escort her out. You think you're so much better than us with your little house and your stable job? But you're nothing. Autumn, nothing. We welcomed you when you had nowhere to go, and this is how you repay us. Ma'am, you need to leave, one of the guards said firmly. I'll leave when I'm ready. She struggled against their gentle restraint. That house should be ours. We have children. What kind of person hoards space when family needs it? What kind of monster calls the police on family? The entire office was watching now, and I felt heat rise to my cheeks. But Nina stepped forward, putting herself between Ivy and me. The kind of person who's been harassed, stalked, and robbed, Nina said coolly. The kind who's documented everything for the lawyers. The kind who's done being a victim. Now get out before we add workplace harassment to the charges. Ivy's face went white at the mention of lawyers and charges. You got a lawyer for this? For family. You stopped being family when you tried to steal my identity. I found my voice finally. When Travis tried to break into my house at 3 a.m, family doesn't do that. Ivy. Security finally managed to escort her out, but her screaming continued all the way to the parking lot. I could hear her threatening lawsuits, family boycotts, social ruin, anything she could think of to hurt me. My manager, looking shaken, suggested I take the rest of the day off, and maybe work from home for a few days, just until things calmed down. I wanted to argue, to insist I wouldn't be driven from my workplace too, but exhaustion won. I gathered my things while Nina called Marcus to report the incident. He says to document everything, she reported. The workplace harassment actually strengthens your case, and Autumn, you're staying with me tonight, no arguments. As we walked to the parking lot together, I saw Ivy's car still there, though security had made her wait inside it. She was on her phone, gesticulating wildly, probably rallying whatever family members would still listen to her version of events. You did the right thing, Nina said, following my gaze. I know it doesn't feel like it now, but you did. I touched the Boundaries keychain in my pocket, its edges sharp against my palm. The word had taken on new meaning over these past weeks. Boundaries weren't just lines you drew, they were lines you defended, even when it hurt, even when the person crossing them claimed to love you. That evening, the restraining order was granted. Marcus called with the news while Nina and I were eating takeout in her apartment, my overnight bag sitting by the door like a refugee's bundle. It's temporary for now, he explained. There will be a hearing in 2 weeks to make it permanent. Ivy and Travis will be served tomorrow. Once they are, they can't come within 100 yards of you, your home, or your workplace. What if they violate it? Then they'll be arrested immediately. No warnings, no second chances. The police take restraining order violations very seriously. After I hung up, Nina raised her wine glass. To Boundaries, she said. I clinked my glass against hers, the sound ringing clear in her quiet apartment. To Boundaries. But even as we toasted, I knew this wasn't over. Ivy's rage in my workplace, Travis's midnight attempted break-in, these were the acts of people who felt entitled to what wasn't theirs. The restraining order was just paper, and paper had never stopped Ivy before. Still, it was a start, a line drawn not in sand, but in law, and for the first time since coming home to find strangers painting my bedroom walls, I felt like I had power in this situation. The Boundaries. Keychain sat on Nina's coffee table, catching the light. Tomorrow, it would go back in my pocket, a talisman against the chaos still to come. But tonight, I could rest knowing I'd finally said the word that mattered most, no. And I'd meant it. The rain started around 4 that afternoon, a steady Milwaukee drizzle that turned the world gray and miserable. I'd been staying with Nina for 3 days, working from her apartment while the restraining order was being served. Marcus had called that morning to confirm both Ivy and Travis had been officially notified. They were now legally required to stay away from me. I should have felt safer. Instead, I felt like I was waiting for a storm to break. Nina had gone to the grocery store, insisting I stay put and rest. I was reviewing spreadsheets on my laptop when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Autumn. The voice was thin, scared, a child's voice. My heart clenched. Megan, Ivy's daughter, 10 years old and too smart for her own good. I'd always had a soft spot for her, even as I'd grown to despise her parents. Aunt Autumn, I'm scared. Mom and Dad are acting really weird. And they said we have to go somewhere tonight but won't say where. Mom's been crying and throwing things in bags. Sweetie, where are you right now? Home, but Mom said we're leaving soon. She keeps saying it's your fault we have to go. What did you do? Before I could answer, I heard Ivy's voice in the background, sharp and angry. Megan, who are you talking to? The line went dead. I stared at the phone, my mind racing. Were they planning to run Skip Town to avoid the legal consequences? Or was something else happening? 20 minutes later, Nina's doorbell rang. I checked the peephole. No one there. But when I opened the door cautiously, I found 2 large duffel bags on the doorstep. My stomach dropped as I recognized them. They were mine, bags I'd stored in my basement, filled with winter clothes and camping gear. There was a note taped to one of them, written in Ivy's dramatic scrawl. You want to be alone so badly? Fine, but family takes care of family, and if you won't help us, we'll help ourselves. Check your precious house. I called Marcus immediately, then the police, then grabbed Nina's spare key and headed for my car. I knew I shouldn't go to my house. It could be a trap, a violation of the restraining order if they were there, but the implied threat in that note terrified me. The police beat me there. 2 cruisers were already parked outside when I pulled up, their lights painting red and blue shadows in the rain. Officer Bradley, who'd responded to the Travis break-in, met me at the curb. Don't go inside yet, he said. Your cousin and her family are in there. They claim to be moving in because they're being evicted and have nowhere else to go. They can't do that, I sputtered. There's a restraining order. They claim they were here before it was served this morning. Said they've been staying here for days with your permission. It's complicated because what? But I could see it through the window. Ivy standing in my living room, gesturing dramatically to another officer. Travis sat on my couch like he belonged there. Their children were there too, looking confused and scared, still in their pajamas at 5 in the evening. She has mail, Officer Bradley said reluctantly. Addressed to her at this address, recent mail, and there are children involved, which makes immediate removal complicated. We need to verify. That's fraud, I interrupted. She must have had mail sent here. Check the dates. I bet it all started arriving in the last few days. I have security footage showing they haven't been staying here. Marcus arrived then, stepping out of his car with a briefcase and an expression that could freeze fire. He introduced himself to the officers and immediately began laying out the legal situation, the restraining order, the documented break-ins, the attempted identity theft, the workplace harassment. My client has extensive security footage showing the property has been empty except for the documented illegal entries, he said crisply. Whatever mail Ms. Mitchell has produced is irrelevant to the criminal trespass currently occurring. While they debated, I noticed neighbors gathering, watching the drama unfold. Mrs. Henderson caught my eye and walked over, umbrella tilted against the rain. I saw them arrive about 2 hours ago, she said loud enough for the officers to hear. With those bags and boxes, the woman was crying, saying something about family abandoning them, but I know for a fact they haven't been living here. I would have seen them coming and going. More neighbors chimed in, confirming they'd never seen Ivy's family staying at my house. The tide began to turn. Officer Bradley went back inside to talk to Ivy and Travis, through the window. I watched the conversation grow heated. Ivy was waving papers, probably the fraudulent mail, while Travis stood up, his face red with anger. Then I saw something that made my blood run cold. Ivy grabbed Megan's arm, pulling her forward, clearly trying to use her own daughter as a shield against removal. The little girl looked terrified, tears streaming down her face. That's enough, I said, pushing past Officer Bradley as he came back out. I'm going in there. Ma'am, you can't. but I was already through the door. "Megan, sweetie, come here." The little girl tried to move toward me, but Ivy's grip tightened. "Don't you dare," she hissed at me. "You did this to us. You made us homeless." "You made yourselves criminals," I shot back. "Megan, Tyler, your parents made bad choices. But that's not your fault. Officers, these children need to be removed from this situation." "How dare you?" Ivy screamed. "They're my children." "And you're using them as pawns." I turned to Officer Bradley. "There must be protocols for this. The children shouldn't be part of their parents' criminal behavior." Marcus stepped in then, his voice calm but firm. "Officers, my client is correct. Using minors to avoid lawful removal is itself a crime. I suggest we contact Child Protective Services to ensure the children's welfare while you arrest Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell for criminal trespass and violation of a restraining order." That did it. Travis lunged forward, shouting obscenities, and had to be restrained. Ivy dissolved into hysterical tears, alternating between begging and threatening, but within an hour, both were in handcuffs. The children were taken to the station to wait for their grandmother, Ivy's mother, who I'd called despite our strained relationship. She was horrified by what her daughter had done and promised to take care of the kids. As the police cars pulled away, I stood in my violated home once again. They'd been here only a few hours, but the damage was evident. Furniture moved, their belongings scattered around. That same entitled assumption that my space was theirs for the taking. "We'll help you clean up," Nina said. I hadn't even heard her arrive, but there she was with several other coworkers, all ready to help restore my sanctuary. "The rain," I said stupidly. "You'll get wet." "That's what friends are for," she replied, squeezing my shoulder. "To stand with you in the rain while you defend what's yours." As we worked to reclaim my space, I thought about Megan's scared voice on the phone. The children were the real victims here, caught between parents who couldn't accept boundaries and an aunt who'd had to enforce them. The boundaries. Keychain was heavy in my pocket. Its weight a reminder that sometimes protecting yourself means others get hurt. But as I looked around at my friends helping me put my home back together, I realized something important. Real family, the kind you choose, respects your boundaries. They don't try to tear them down. The rain continued to fall, washing away the afternoon's drama, but my house stood firm, my sanctuary intact, my boundaries held. Tomorrow there would be court dates and legal consequences. Tonight, there was just the quiet work of reclaiming what was mine. Surrounded by people who understood that no was a complete sentence and respected it. The knock came at exactly 8:17 a.m. I knew because I'd been awake since dawn, expecting something like this. After Ivy and Travis's arrest 3 days ago, the silence had been too complete, too ominous. The restraining order violations meant they'd spent a night in jail before being released on bail, and I knew Ivy well enough to know she wouldn't let that go without retaliation. Through the peephole, I saw 2 police officers, neither of whom I recognized from the previous incidents. My stomach sank as I opened the door. Autumn Davis, the older officer, whose badge read Sergeant Mills, looked stern but not unkind. "Yes. We need to ask you some questions about allegations made against you. May we come in?" My hands trembled as I let them in, but I forced myself to stay calm. Marcus had warned me this might happen. "Can I ask what this is regarding?" "Your cousin, Ivy Mitchell, has filed a report claiming theft and elderly abuse," Sergeant Mills said, pulling out a notebook. "She says you stole money from your grandmother's estate and have been keeping family heirlooms that rightfully belong to other family members." I almost laughed at the absurdity. My grandmother had died 15 years ago. When I was 14, I'd been a minor, nowhere near involved in any estate dealings. "That's impossible," I said carefully. "I was a child when my grandmother passed. I couldn't have had any control over her estate. She also claims you've been sending threatening messages and that you manipulated her into giving you money over the years, which you never repaid." The second officer, younger and clearly uncomfortable, shifted his weight. "She provided text messages as evidence." May I see them? They showed me printouts of text conversations I'd never had. Messages that portrayed me as demanding, cruel, manipulative. The phone number was mine, but the words were pure fiction. Some were dated from times I could prove I was at work, in meetings with dozens of witnesses. "These are fake," I said, working to keep my voice steady. "I can prove it. I have my actual phone records, and these messages don't exist. Plus, I have security footage from my workplace that shows I was in meetings during several of these supposed conversation times." She also provided this. Sergeant Mills produced a receipt. "For furniture she claims she purchased for your home. Says you promised to pay her back but never did." I looked at the receipt. $3,000 for bedroom furniture. Dated a week ago. The furniture I'd bought myself from a estate sale 6 months ago, for which I had my own receipts. "Officer, I have documentation for everything in my home," I said, pulling out my phone. "I've been keeping records because of ongoing harassment from my cousin. May I call my lawyer?" The officers exchanged glances. "That won't be necessary right now," Sergeant Mills said. "But we will need you to come to the station to provide a formal statement." "Am I under arrest?" "No, ma'am. But your cooperation would be helpful in clearing this up." I knew better than to go alone. "I'll meet you there with my attorney." They left, and I immediately called Marcus. He was at my door within 20 minutes. His expression grim as I showed him the fake messages and receipts. "She's getting desperate," he said. "This is actually good for us. Filing false police reports is a serious crime, but we need to handle this carefully." At the police station, the truth began to unravel quickly. I provided my actual phone records, which showed none of the alleged messages. The metadata on Ivy's evidence revealed it had been created using a message spoofing app, the same one she'd used before. My bank statements proved I'd purchased my own furniture, and security footage from my workplace confirmed my whereabouts during the supposed threatening conversations. But Ivy wasn't done, as we were providing evidence to Detective Raymond, who had taken over the case. Another officer interrupted. "We just got a call from Child Protective Services," she said. "Someone reported that Ms. Davis has been leaving drugs around her house where children could access them, and that she's been having violent episodes." "What children?" I asked, bewildered. "No children live in or visit my house." "The report says you regularly babysit your cousin's children and have been exposing them to dangerous situations." Marcus's hand on my arm kept me from exploding. "My client has had a restraining order against the Mitchells for a week. Their children haven't been in her home except during the illegal entry 3 days ago, for which the parents were arrested." Detective Raymond's expression darkened. "How many agencies has she contacted?" As if on cue, his phone rang. After a brief conversation, he looked even more frustrated. "That was the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. They received a report about an elaborate identity theft ring allegedly run by Ms. Davis." "This is insane," I breathed. "It's a common tactic," Marcus said calmly. "When perpetrators face consequences, they try to muddy the waters by making multiple false reports. They hope something will stick, or that the victim will be too overwhelmed to pursue charges." Over the next 3 hours, we methodically disproved each allegation. The detective grew increasingly frustrated with Ivy's obvious lies. When we finally provided the security footage of Travis attempting to break into my house and Ivy's workplace harassment, along with documentation of the attempted identity theft against me, the picture became clear. "We'll be adding filing false reports to her charges," Detective Raymond said. "This kind of waste of police resources is something we take very seriously." But the day wasn't over. As Marcus and I left the station, my phone buzzed with notifications. Ivy had taken to social media, posting a dramatic tale of family betrayal. According to her version, I was a heartless relative who had refused to help family in need, had stolen from them, and had used my connections to have them falsely arrested. The posts were already being shared by distant relatives and acquaintances who didn't know the full story. My phone began ringing with calls from family members I hadn't spoken to in years, some offering support, but others demanding explanations. "Don't engage," Marcus advised. Don't post anything. Don't respond to comments. Let her dig her own grave. But it was hard to stay silent when lies about me were spreading like wildfire. Harder still when I got a text from my aunt, my late mother's sister, saying she was disappointed in me for not helping family in need. That evening, Nina came over with Thai food and a bottle of wine. I saw the posts, she said simply. Anyone who knows you knows it's bullshit. But what about everyone who doesn't know me? I asked, scrolling through the growing comment threads. She's painting me as some kind of monster. Nina gently took my phone away. You know what the truth is. The people who matter know what the truth is. The police know what the truth is. That's what counts. She was right, but it still hurt. I'd worked so hard to build a stable, respectable life, and Ivy was trying to destroy my reputation out of spite. The next morning brought a new development. Marcus called early with news. Ivy's been arrested again. She apparently tried to access your credit report last night using stolen credentials. The credit bureau's fraud department traced it directly to her IP address. She's not giving up, I said, exhausted. No, but she's also ensuring she'll face serious jail time. Every false report, every fraudulent access attempt, every violation adds to her sentence. She's destroying her own life because she can't accept that you said no. I thought about the boundaries keychain sitting on my kitchen counter. Such a simple word. But Ivy was willing to burn down her entire life rather than respect it. The fake messages, the false police reports, the social media smear campaign, all because I wouldn't let her take over my house. As I made coffee and prepared for another day of dealing with the fallout, I realized something important. Ivy's escalation wasn't really about me or my house. It was about control. She'd spent years believing she had power over me because she'd helped me once when I was vulnerable. When I'd finally stood up for myself, her entire worldview had crumbled. The truth was already winning. Every lie she told created a paper trail that led back to her. Every false report added to her charges. Every fake document revealed her desperation. My phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Henderson. Saw the nonsense online. Already told everyone on the neighborhood Facebook page about what really happened. That woman belongs in jail. Support came from unexpected places throughout the day. Co-workers who'd witnessed Ivy's harassment shared their own accounts. The family members who'd initially believed her lies began reaching out as the truth became clear. By evening, Ivy's social media accounts had been suspended for harassment and spreading false information. The local news had picked up the story. But with the accurate angle, woman faces multiple charges for harassment and false reports against cousin. I sat in my quiet house, Milo purring in my lap, and felt something I hadn't expected: pity. Not for what Ivy was going through. She'd earned every consequence, but for the person she'd become. So consumed by entitlement and rage that she'd destroyed her own family rather than accept a simple no. The boundaries. Keychain caught the light as I reached for my tea. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more lies to disprove, more consequences for Ivy to face. But tonight, in my sage-green bedroom in my hard-won house, I was safe. The truth was on my side, and that was stronger than any lie she could tell. Marcus Campbell arrived at my house at 3 p.m. sharp, carrying a thick folder and wearing an expression of grim satisfaction. The past week had been a whirlwind of legal procedures, but he'd called that morning saying we'd reached a turning point. "Sit down," he said, spreading documents across my dining room table. "We need to discuss what's happened and what comes next." I made tea while he organized papers, the boundaries keychain clinking softly against my keys as I moved around the kitchen. When I returned, Marcus had arranged everything into neat piles. "First, the good news," he began. "The forensic analysis of the fake text messages is complete. The metadata proves conclusively they were created using Text Spoof Pro, a message falsification app. The IP address traces directly to Ivy's laptop." He slid a technical report across the table. The details were complex, but the conclusion was clear: every single threatening message Ivy had provided to police was fabricated. "But here's where it gets interesting," Marcus continued. The Financial Crimes Unit did a deeper dive into Ivy and Travis's activities. Turns out your identity theft wasn't their first attempt. My teacup froze halfway to my lips. What? Travis's elderly aunt in Florida, his former employer, 2 neighbors from their previous apartment complex, all reported suspicious financial activity in the last 3 years, small amounts, nothing fully investigated until now. The picture he painted was damning, a pattern of exploitation targeting anyone they perceived as vulnerable or who had something they wanted. My house had just been their most ambitious target. The prosecutor is building a RICO case, Marcus said. Pattern of criminal enterprise. With your evidence as the cornerstone, they're looking at serious federal charges. What about the kids? I asked, thinking of Megan's scared voice on the phone. Ivy's mother has temporary custody. CPS is involved, but she seems to be providing a stable environment. The children are in counseling. Relief washed over me. Whatever Ivy and Travis had done, Megan and Tyler didn't deserve to suffer for it. Marcus pulled out another document. Now, about the false police reports. Detective Raymond has been thorough. Every agency Ivy contacted has filed charges for false reporting. The FBI is particularly unhappy about having their resources wasted. The list was staggering. In her desperation, Ivy had contacted the FBI, DEA, IRS, CPS, Adult Protective Services, and even Homeland Security with increasingly wild allegations. Each false report was a separate criminal charge. She claimed I was running a drug lab, I read, incredulous. And money laundering, elderly abuse, child endangerment, tax evasion, and cyber terrorism, Marcus added dryly. She got creative. This is insane. This is desperation, he corrected, but it's also evidence of malicious intent. No reasonable person makes dozens of false reports. This shows a clear pattern of harassment and abuse of the legal system. He pulled out his laptop and showed me a screen full of social media posts. We've also documented her online defamation campaign, screenshots of everything before it was taken down, her posts, the comments she made under fake accounts, the messages she sent to your employer and coworkers. I recognize some of the fake accounts, variations of my name, profiles using my photos with inflammatory captions. She'd created an entire ecosystem of lies. Can we prove these are hers? Already have. Digital forensics traced them all to 2 devices, her phone and laptop, same IP addresses, same device fingerprints. She didn't even use a VPN. The scope of her campaign was breathtaking. She'd spent hours, maybe days, creating this alternate reality where I was the villain, all because I'd said no to her moving into my house. There's more, Marcus said, his tone shifting. The house title search revealed something interesting. Remember when Ivy claimed you'd stolen inheritance from your grandmother? I nodded. Your grandmother did leave a will, small estate, but she specifically left her jewelry collection to you. Guess who contested it at the time and lost? Ivy, I breathed. Got it in one. She's been resentful about that for 15 years. This isn't really about your house, Autumn. This is about long-held jealousy and entitlement finally boiling over. We spent the next hour going through evidence. Marcus had been meticulous, creating a timeline that showed the escalation from boundary crossing to criminal behavior. Every text saved, every video preserved, every witness statement collected. The prosecutor wants to meet with you tomorrow, he said finally. They're confident about conviction, but they need your testimony to seal it. Will I have to face her in court? Eventually, yes, but you'll be prepared, and I'll be right there with you. As Marcus packed up his documents, my neighbor Mrs. Henderson knocked. She'd become something of an ally through all this, her own experience with family harassment making her sympathetic to my situation. Thought you should see this, she said, handing me a printout from the neighborhood Facebook group. People are sharing their own stories about the Mitchells. The posts were eye-opening. Former landlords describing property damage and skipped rent. Parents from Megan's school talking about money that went missing from fundraisers Ivy had helped organize. A woman who'd hired Travis for handyman work only to have tools disappear. "They've been grifting for years," Mrs. Henderson said. "You're just the first person to stand up to them legally." After she left, I sat with the weight of everything Marcus had revealed. This wasn't just about me anymore. Ivy and Travis had left a trail of victims, people who'd been too embarrassed or thought the amounts too small to pursue legal action. My phone buzzed with a call from Nina. "You need to see the news," she said without preamble. I turned on the local station to see Ivy being arrested again, this time at a bank where she'd apparently tried to open an account using my social security number. The security footage showed her arguing with the manager, then trying to run when police arrived. She didn't get far. "Federal charges filed against local woman in identity theft ring," the anchor read. "Prosecutors say this is one of the most extensive cases of familial fraud they've seen." The report detailed the investigation, my case being the catalyst that had uncovered years of financial crimes. They didn't use my name, referring to me only as the victim who came forward, but I knew my role in stopping them. That night, I couldn't sleep, not from fear this time, but from a strange mix of vindication and sadness. Tomorrow, I'd sit with prosecutors and help build the case that would likely send Ivy and Travis to federal prison. Their children would grow up without parents because of choices that started with wanting what wasn't theirs. I picked up the Boundaries keychain, running my thumb over the engraved word. Such a simple concept. This is mine, that is yours. Respect the difference. But Ivy had seen boundaries as challenges, obstacles to overcome rather than lines to respect. My phone lit up with a message from Marcus. "Forgot to mention, the prosecutor says you'll likely be eligible for restitution for all damages, legal fees, and emotional distress. Conservative estimate is mid-six figures. Thought you should know." I set the phone aside without responding. The money would help, certainly, but it wasn't about that. It had never been about money or even the house. Really, it was about the right to say no and have it respected. As dawn broke through my bedroom windows, painting the sage-green walls with golden light, I made peace with what was coming. Today, I'd tell my truth to people who could do something about it. Today, the evidence would speak louder than Ivy's lies ever could. The Boundaries keychain sat on my nightstand, a small bronze reminder of the war I'd never wanted but had been forced to fight and win. The morning sun cast long shadows across my front yard as I knelt in the damp soil, carefully transplanting lavender seedlings along the walkway. Nina worked beside me, her hands steady as she helped create neat rows of what would soon be fragrant purple borders. It had been 2 weeks since Ivy and Travis were formally charged, and I was slowly reclaiming not just my house, but my peace. "These are going to be beautiful," Nina said, sitting back on her heels to survey our work. "Lavender for peace and protection. Perfect choice." I smiled, wiping dirt from my hands. "Mrs. Henderson suggested them, said they helped her heal after her own family drama." The elderly neighbor had become an unexpected source of wisdom through everything. She'd even given me the seedlings from her own garden, along with detailed care instructions and a knowing pat on the shoulder. My phone buzzed on the porch steps. Marcus Campbell's name appeared on the screen. "Morning, Autumn. I have some updates. Ivy and Travis took plea deals." I stood slowly, my heart racing. "What kind of deals?" "Travis pled guilty to attempted burglary and identity theft. He's looking at 3 to 5 years federal, likely serving 2 with good behavior. Ivy's charges are more extensive: identity theft, fraud, filing false police reports, criminal harassment. She's facing 5 to 7. The numbers felt surreal. Years. They'd spend years in prison because they couldn't accept being told no. "There's more," Marcus continued. "As part of the plea agreement, they've admitted to the other frauds the FBI uncovered. Travis's aunt, the neighbors, the employer, all of it. They're required to pay full restitution to all victims." "What about their house, the kids?" "The house is being sold to pay legal fees and restitution. Ivy's mother retains custody of the children. CPS is satisfied with the arrangement." After we hung up, I told Nina the news. She hugged me tightly, dirt-covered hands and all. "It's over," she said. "You won." But it didn't feel like winning. It felt like surviving. We spent the rest of the morning finishing the lavender border, then added solar lights along the pathway. As we worked, other neighbors stopped by, some to help, others just to show support. The community that had watched the drama unfold was now helping me rebuild. That afternoon, I had an appointment with a locksmith. Not for security this time, but for aesthetics. I was replacing the industrial-grade locks with something more decorative, something that said home instead of fortress. "Feeling safe enough for pretty locks now?" The locksmith, an older man named Carl, asked as he worked. "Getting there," I admitted. He nodded knowingly. Had a customer once who went through something similar. Brother-in-law thought he was entitled to half the house. Took lawyers and police to sort it out. Family can be the worst sometimes because they know exactly how to hurt you. As he installed the new bronze lock set that complemented my Boundaries keychain, I reflected on his words. Ivy had known my vulnerabilities, my desire for family connection after losing my parents, my gratitude for past help, my difficulty saying no. She'd weaponized all of it. That evening, I hosted a small dinner party, the first since everything had started. Nina came, of course, along with Mrs. Henderson, a few coworkers who'd stood by me, and surprisingly, Ivy's mother, Patricia. Patricia had called the week before, asking if we could talk. She'd been horrified by her daughter's actions and wanted to apologize in person. I'd hesitated, but ultimately agreed. "I failed her somehow," Patricia said quietly, as we sat on my back deck after dinner. "I see that now, always making excuses for her behavior, always bailing her out of trouble. I enabled this." "You couldn't have known it would go this far," I offered. "Couldn't I?" She's always been jealous of anyone who had something she didn't, always felt the world owed her more. I kept hoping she'd grow out of it. We talked about the children, about how they were adjusting. Megan had started therapy and was doing better. Tyler, younger and less aware of the details, seemed mainly confused about why his parents were gone. Patricia was doing her best to provide stability. "I've set up education funds for them," I said suddenly, surprising myself. "From the restitution money, for college or trade school, whatever they choose." Patricia's eyes filled with tears. "After everything they did to you." "The kids didn't do anything. They shouldn't pay for their parents' choices." She hugged me then. This woman who'd raised the person who'd tried to destroy my life, and somehow it felt like a circle closing. As the evening wound down and guests began leaving, I found myself alone with Nina in my living room. The sage walls glowed softly in the lamplight, and Milo had emerged from his hiding spot to curl up on his favorite chair. "You know what I realized today?" I said, fingering the Boundaries keychain. I kept thinking this was about learning to say no, but it was really about learning that I deserved to say no, that my space, my peace, my life, they're worth protecting. Nina smiled. "And that real family respects your boundaries instead of trying to tear them down." "Exactly." Later, after everyone had gone, I walked through my house, really walked through it. Not the paranoid checking I'd done for months, but a peaceful appreciation of each room. The kitchen where Ivy had cooked her spite-filled beef stew. The living room where she'd been arrested. The bedroom she'd tried to claim as her own. All of it was mine again. More than that, it was home again. I paused at the window overlooking my front yard, admiring the new lavender border in the moonlight. Tomorrow, Marcus would file the final paperwork for the permanent restraining order. Next month, I'd testify at the sentencing hearing. There were still legal procedures ahead, loose ends to tie up. But tonight, I was just a woman in her own house, safe and surrounded by the life she'd built. The security cameras were still there, but no longer constantly monitored. The new locks were decorative, but still secure. The balance between safety and paranoia was slowly shifting back toward normal. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. For a moment, the old fear spiked. Was this another attack? Another false accusation? But it was from one of Travis's victims, the elderly aunt in Florida. Heard you were the one who exposed them. Thank you for being brave enough to stand up. Because of you, I'm getting my money back. God bless. I saved the message, adding it to a folder of similar notes I'd received. Coworkers who'd witnessed Ivy's harassment, former victims who'd finally seen justice, neighbors who'd watched me fight for my home and won. As I headed to bed, I picked up the boundaries keychain one more time. Such a simple word, but learning to enforce it had changed everything, cost everything. In some ways, any chance of a relationship with that branch of family was gone forever. But what I'd gained was worth more. Self-respect, a community that had my back, the knowledge that I could stand up for myself even when it was hard, even when the attacker was family, even when everyone said I should just give in to keep the peace. Peace, real peace, not the false calm of giving in to avoid conflict, but the true peace of knowing your boundaries are secure. I set the keychain on my nightstand and turned off the light. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the ongoing legal processes, the work of fully healing from months of harassment. But tonight, in my sage green bedroom, in my hard-won house, surrounded by newly planted lavender and protected by the boundaries I'd learned to enforce, I was home. And that was everything. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined. 6 months after that first confrontation in my bedroom, I sat in the witness stand. The boundaries. Keychain tucked in my jacket pocket like a talisman. Ivy and Travis sat at the defendant's table in orange jumpsuits, their lawyers beside them. They looked smaller somehow, diminished by the consequences of their choices. Ms. Davis, the prosecutor began, can you tell the court about the impact these crimes have had on your life? I'd prepared for this moment, but my voice still shook as I began. I bought my house as a symbol of stability after losing my parents. It was supposed to be my sanctuary. Instead, I spent months afraid in my own home, documenting everything, checking locks, reviewing security footage. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't feel safe. I talked about the financial cost, the security systems, the lawyer fees, the time off work, but more than that, I talked about the emotional toll of being betrayed by family, of having my kindness weaponized against me, of learning that saying no to unreasonable demands could spark such vindictive retaliation. The defendants didn't just try to steal my house, I concluded. They tried to steal my sense of safety, my reputation, my peace of mind. They filed false reports with every agency they could think of, created fake evidence, and turned what should have been a simple boundary into a criminal campaign of harassment. When Ivy's lawyer cross-examined me, trying to paint her as a desperate mother just trying to provide for her children, I remained calm. The evidence spoke for itself. The forged documents, the false police reports, the identity theft attempts against multiple victims. Desperation doesn't justify criminal behavior, I said firmly, and using children as emotional leverage doesn't make theft and fraud acceptable. The sentencing came 2 hours later. Travis received 4 years federal prison time with possibility of parole in 2, Ivy, as the primary perpetrator with more extensive charges, got 6 years. The judge also ordered lifetime restraining orders and full restitution to all victims. As the bailiffs led them away, Ivy turned to look at me one last time. I expected hatred, but what I saw was worse, complete incomprehension. Even now, she couldn't understand why I hadn't just given her what she wanted. Outside the courthouse, Marcus shook my hand. You did well. It's over now. Patricia was waiting by the steps with Megan and Tyler. She'd brought them to see me. Not the sentencing. They were too young for that burden. Aunt Autumn. Megan ran over, hugging me tightly. Grandma says you helped set up college funds for us. I did, I confirmed, kneeling to her level. Because you and your brother deserve good futures, no matter what. Tyler, shy at 7 years old, hung back until Patricia encouraged him forward. Thank you, he whispered. You're welcome, sweetheart. As they left, Patricia mouthed thank you over the children's heads. She'd stepped up admirably, providing the stable home Ivy never could. The kids would be okay. 3 months later, I stood in my backyard hosting a very different gathering. The lavender had bloomed spectacularly, filling the air with its calming scent. Friends and neighbors mingled, celebrating not just the end of the legal proceedings, but the beginning of something new. Nina raised a toast to Autumn, who taught us all that boundaries aren't walls. They're the foundation for healthy relationships. And to all of you, I responded, who stood by me when standing alone would have been so much harder. Mrs. Henderson had brought her famous apple pie and stories of her own boundary victories from decades past. Co-workers who'd witnessed Ivy's workplace meltdown shared laughter instead of fear. Even some distant relatives who'd initially believed Ivy's lies had come around, apologizing for doubting me. The doorbell rang as the sun was setting. I found a delivery driver with an envelope requiring signature. Inside was a letter from one of Travis's victims, the elderly aunt in Florida. "Dear Ms. Davis," it read, "I wanted you to know that because of your courage in exposing their crimes, I not only recovered my stolen funds, but also found the strength to pursue charges for elder abuse. At 81, I thought I was too old to fight back. You showed me it's never too late to demand justice. May God bless you with the peace you've earned." I added the letter to my growing collection, testament not to victory, but to the ripple effect of standing up for yourself. That night, after everyone left, I sat in my living room with Milo purring on my lap. The house felt different now, not just safe, but truly mine in a way it hadn't before the ordeal. Every room held memories of fighting for my right to exist peacefully in my own space. I picked up the Boundaries keychain from the coffee table, running my thumb over the worn bronze. Nina had given it to me when I was drowning, unable to see a way forward that didn't involve surrendering to Ivy's demands. It had become my anchor through police interviews, court testimony, and sleepless nights. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Thought you'd want to know. The federal prosecutor is using your case as a training example for familial fraud. Your documentation methods are being taught as best practices. You're helping future victims." I smiled at that. Out of all that pain and fear had come something useful, a roadmap for others facing similar situations. Proof that you could say no to family and survive the backlash. Looking around my home, at the sage walls Ivy had tried to paint over, at the furniture she'd tried to rearrange, at the life she'd tried to commandeer, I felt a profound sense of gratitude, not for the trauma, but for what I'd discovered about myself through it. I was stronger than I'd known. I had better friends than I'd realized, and I'd learned the most important lesson of all, that real love, real family, real friendship, they don't require you to sacrifice your boundaries. They respect them. The lavender scent drifted through the open windows, a reminder of beauty growing from difficult ground. Tomorrow would be an ordinary day. Work, errands, maybe dinner with Nina, no court dates, no police reports, no security footage to review, just life, lived peacefully within boundaries I'd fought to establish and won the right to maintain. As I headed to bed, I hung the Boundaries keychain on a hook by the door, not hidden in my pocket anymore, but displayed proudly, a reminder and a promise. This is my space. These are my limits, and that's not just okay, it's necessary. My house wasn't just a building anymore. It wasn't just an investment or a symbol of independence. It was proof that sometimes the most important battles are the ones we fight for ourselves, for our right to say no, for our peace of mind. And in that peaceful house, protected by laws and locks, but most of all by my own determination, I finally felt what I'd been searching for since my parents died all those years ago. I was home. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and exchange thoughts about boundaries, family dynamics, and standing up for yourself. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. And if you really want to help others discover this story, hit that hype button to boost it to more listeners who might need to hear that it's okay to enforce boundaries, even with family. Your support means everything.